Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101. My name is Clayton Craddock, and today we have Michael Manasseh, the drummer for the current Hadestown tour. How are you today?
Doing great. So grateful to be here.
You are in Central Florida, and you're playing a retirement home.
Retirement town, but same idea.
What's it called again? What's the place?
Villages.
The Villages. That's interesting. So you are on the tour. I was fortunate enough to sub on the first national tour, and I found the music and the vibe and the drumming to be incredibly interesting and complex and just intriguing every single night. I also know that you are a Columbia University graduate and you studied economics. You got to tell me, how do you go from Columbia University in economics to the road to hell on Haiti Sound?
Yeah. Well, on paper, it seems very disjointed, but it actually makes a lot of sense in reality. So when I went to Columbia, I started out as a math major and then 2 years in switched to economics, all the while participating in jazz ensembles and doing student theater. But those were definitely extracurriculars that backed up the academic work I was doing. It was only senior year of college where I decided to commit a lot more to the student theater work. And senior year, I basically did every single production on campus that had a drummer. Maybe it was something around 6 shows I ended up doing that year. And it was during that time that I was thinking, like, oh, maybe what if theater, this thing that I'd been doing sort of since high school, what if this is something that I could pursue as a career? Hadn't really thought about it before that point. And so the end of senior year, I just started reaching out, talking to a lot of drummers on Broadway and touring. And through those conversations and my friends in college, I got a summer stock gig in New Hampshire, the New London Barn Playhouse. And I did that the summer of 2023. Did another theater gig at a dinner theater in Florida, end of 2023. And then got the Shrek National Tour gig. And so I did that from February 2024 to August. And then during that time, auditioned for this tour. And now I'm here. And so,
Wow.
like, one thing led to another. And there are people along the way that helped me get to those points. But that's just like the real Cliff Notes version of my journey.
I'm just curious as how you got the Shrek tour.
Yeah. So I joined this directory called Muse, which is Musicians United for Social Equity. And they have a mentorship program where you fill out your information, they pair you with someone in the industry, and you basically just like have this person as a resource. And so I got paired in the summer of 2023 with John Clancy, whose work I had known. I had done Fun Home in college. And so I knew that he was a drummer and also did a lot of orchestrating work. And so we connected. He actually thought I wanted to be an orchestrator. I'm like, actually, I'm a drummer. And we got talking. And months later, I called him and we were talking. He was like, well, I'm doing this new orchestration for this new tour of Shrek that's going out. He had orchestrated the original Broadway production. And he was saying, like, yeah, I was wondering if you'd be interested. I'm like, yes, let's move to New York. This was September, and I had just moved back to New York with nothing. I had no job. I was literally just living in New York for no reason. And then this tour, he just basically hands it to me. He'd never heard my playing, except maybe I'd sent him a video or something, but that's it. I had never filmed anything for him. And here he is offering me a tour. The very next day, I get an email from Nate Patton, who's been on this podcast and who is contracting the tour. He's like, hey, this is the details of the tour. Can you send me something? All I had was a reel that I had put together from the summer stock gig, sent that, and then like got an offer like the next day.
You grew up in the Boston area, correct?
Yes.
And were you always into mathematics?
I was definitely interested in school. I wouldn't say I was like that. I didn't do any after school math programs. My life was dominated by music
Okay.
from like a very young age, even before I have like any memories. Like when I was 3, I would take out pots and pans from the kitchen and start hitting them. And so it was my parents that put me in lessons when I was 5. And from 5, like almost up until high school, I had amassed like 5 different drum teachers that I was learning from like simultaneously. So all my time outside of school was devoted to music, and school was just the thing I did. And I enjoyed math, I enjoyed numbers and that sort of stuff more than like reading. As a kid, I liked numbers more, but like music was the thing that dominated everything.
Were your parents musical? Did they play instruments?
My parents, not really. But what's interesting is my dad's mom, so my grandmother who passed before I was born, was a dancer and composer and professor in India. And she had studied classical dance, the Carnatic music of South India, and like written her dissertation on it, and was quite the musical figure. I had never met her. And so the story is that like it skipped a generation and went to me.
Are you the only one in your family that plays an instrument?
At one point, I have 4 siblings. I'm the second oldest. At one point or another, all of my siblings played an instrument. I have 3 younger brothers. My first youngest brother plays the bass, and he's a grade year lower than me. In high school, we did big band and the jazz combos together. My 2 younger brothers beyond them, one plays the bass, one plays the drums. And so after we graduated, they took over the big band and combos playing bass and drums. And so there's like almost a decade in our high school of like Manasseh brothers being the rhythm section.
Still play?
Yeah, my youngest brother just did the drums for our high school production of Mean Girls a couple months ago. And my first youngest brother who plays bass, he just sort of plays for fun. He works a day job, but they all still play.
Were there any musicians or bands or other things that surrounded your house or your school that were really big influences on you?
Growing up, it's kind of weird. I feel like I didn't listen to a lot of music growing up. A lot of it was dominated by church music, by like
Okay.
gospel music, because for the first part of my life, first like 12 years of my life, we went to 2 churches on Sunday. We went to like an Assemblies of God Pentecostal church in the morning, and then we went to an Indian church at night. And at
Wow.
first, in the Indian church, I would play drums for those services. And then I eventually started playing drums for the first church. And so a lot of me growing up was listening to those songs to help me play those. And then when I started, learning jazz, it was really starting to get into like those drummers. It was really in high school when I started taking private lessons with John Ramsey, who's the former percussion chair at Berkeley, and who was Art Blakey's former tour manager. That's when I started getting into Art Blakey, and that I would say Art Blakey is like the first person that I would consider like an influence in my playing. He's probably the first drummer who I like actively like stole things from and like really tried to make that a part of my drumming identity. Some of the first solos that I transcribed, like just his comping style, so much of his stuff, I wanted to take all of it. So in terms of drumming influences, I would say that Art Blakey is the first. And it also translates beyond jazz into everything because he was a heavy hitter. So I see his influence in everything I do.
You said that you went to an Indian church at night. What happens at an Indian church as opposed to the Pentecostal church you said that you went to?
Well, the main thing is there's a whole like language thing. This was a South Indian church where Tamil was the language that everyone spoke. And so there would be like an English worship music portion, and then there would be like a Tamil worship portion with specific songs from that tradition. There's like a whole list of songs and like a
Mm,
whole canon of Tamil Christian songs. It's not just like English songs translated. These are like specific songs that I have strong memories of. I only have strong memories of the way it sounds, but I don't have an understanding of what it means translated.
okay.
Um,
So the band was playing that music?
yeah. And it was like fully westernized in its orchestration. So it would be the same exact band playing in this very similar style, but the melody, the sort of structure, and of course the content would be different because it's coming from a different cultural perspective.
Mm.
That perspective brought all those people together. So yeah, that's probably the biggest difference.
Now you say South Asian
Now,
meaning. Oh, really? No, what's the cultural difference between South and North?
oh, there's like a lot. The first thing
Uh,
that's coming to mind is like food. Like the climates are different, so the way that people eat is different. Musically, they're very different. You have the Hindustani tradition in the northern part of India, the Carnatic tradition in the south, and then all the dialects in between. Ethnically, it's different too. And then languages, obviously, there's like so many different languages spoken in India, but like it's a lot more like Hindi, and then like Tamil Nadu is the state in the southern part of India, and like Tamil is spoken there.
okay. Is there better food in the South as opposed to the North?
Oh, I think I like South. I didn't like Indian food, and like to this day, it's not my go-to. But
Mm,
I think I like South Indian food more just because of the memory of growing up with it.
interesting. Yeah, after we get done, I'm going to look into that. I love history and studying different cultures and again, why people do what they do. It's fascinating to me. So, you do certain things in your life because you fell in love with Art Blakey and you studied jazz composition, transcription, and music theory at the Rivers School Conservatory. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
yeah,
That that is a now what exactly was that?
yeah. I was anticipating this happening. So I went to high school at the Rivers School in Weston, Massachusetts. Great school. I love it. They also operate the Rivers School Conservatory. The conservatory operates on its own. They have their own symphony. You can take classes without attending the school. But if you attend the high school, you can take after school programming there for credit, as opposed to taking a required sport. So music was my sport, and it
Mm.
included additional ensembles, transcription classes, theory, that whole thing is what I did after school in the jazz track. You had classical kids, you had choral students as well. So it was a really great program because I got a full academic education. I also got a music education. It was all wrapped into one nice package.
When I was graduating from high school, I wanted to go to Berkeley School of Music. My father was discouraging me because he didn't want me to wind up like all my friends. He thought my friends were bums and were failures, and he wanted me to study accounting and get a 9 to 5 square job and do like he did and work a job until he retired, which is so interesting. I'm at my point where I can almost retire. But anyway, I find it interesting that you decided to go to Columbia University as opposed to go to a music school since you were really into music and this Rivers School was, your sport, as you say. Why Columbia University and not some other conservatory?
Yeah, it's a good question. I knew I didn't want to go to a conservatory because I had done the Berkeley 5 week summer program, summer between junior and senior year of high school. And it was a great program. I had a lot of fun. I did the jazz workshop with like Terry Lynn Carrington, and it was like amazing. At the same time, it felt I knew that I couldn't do this for 4 years. And the reason is because music and drumming operated in balance to everything else in my life. So I would do all this like school or like whatever, and then in balance to that, I would have music and drumming. And so I was looking for a college experience where I could do that, where I could continue focusing on academics and also exist in a strong music program where I could develop further as a musician, as a drummer, and continue going down these two paths because they have like a symbiotic relationship. They work together, they help each other out. And without one, the other one isn't as better off as it could be. And so going to Columbia, there you can't take music performance as a degree, but there is a music performance program that you can take for credit. Did these like jazz ensembles, and they would meet at like 9 o'clock at night on a Monday, very late for like an hour and a half. So by the time you're done, it's like 10:30, 11. Senior year, I was doing two of these ensembles, but it didn't feel like work. It was actually relaxing. I didn't feel like I was stressed out about having to do this ensemble. This is the release. I'm just playing. We're just calling tunes and we're playing them. And like, oh, this is great. It doesn't process the same way as academics. Had I gone to a conservatory, it would have corrupted the two of them by bringing them together.
Very, very smart. I wish I studied business, but I was doing the same thing. It was a release for me to be part of the marching band, but I really just that's all I wanted to do. Now, you studied economics. Were you really focused and did you really enjoy your economics studies and did you find it intriguing or were you just trying to go through the motions in order to get to the 9 o'clock ensemble
No, I
rehearsals?
enjoyed it. I started out as math, and like math is fun until you start abstracting it beyond belief. Like
Tell me about that.
the class that like turned me off to it was like modern algebra, which is like the theory of algebra. Like algebra is the numbers, and this class is like the theory behind the numbers. Yeah, so you're like all the work I was doing, and like I had to do a thing where it's like you're proving the existence of like numbers and like a number line, and it's like it got so abstract and like getting closer to philosophy that I was like, I'm losing a sense of why I did this in the first place.
Mm.
And I took the intro economics course, and it was the exact opposite. Everything was so practical and so tied to the real world. Now, in reality, economics is also theory because things behave in the real world very different than in the classroom. But it still provided a great foundation, not only in that field, the notion of something being better off. And that's all what economics is about. Again, oversimplifying, but the idea that like, how can everyone be better off according to a set of restrictions or changes to an
Mm.
environment? And so that mode of thinking, I think, has guided me beyond college, just the way that I think about things.
I'm not bringing it back to myself. Well, it seems like I'm doing it a lot, explaining things, but I'm going to ask you a question. Over the years, I've started to think differently about things that happen in life. And I heard this one quote from this person. He said, there are no solutions, there are only trade offs. And I need to read his book. It's called Basic Economics. It's this big, fat, red book like this. It's Thomas Sowell.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm curious if there were discussions about, again, this is kind of not, it has nothing to do with drumming right now. We'll get back to drumming. Milton Friedman and people like Thomas Sowell, were there a lot of discussions about the right philosophy of economic thought? And did your teachers tend to like try to push you into one mode of thinking?
I actually would say no, that wasn't the impression that I got. Because a lot of it is like you're just building foundations. So as opposed to like arguing for, Milton Keynes's like philosophy, which is like if you go to the University of Chicago, that is their view of economics is Milton Keynes's version. There's a whole that's the like Chicago School of Economics.
Yes.
That's gonna be the version of economics that you're taught. But for
Mm.
us, it was really just like the foundations and learning what each one is and how each one operates. And I actually think it allowed us to form our own thoughts and opinions about how these systems and theories actually work, and or if they work at all.
Well, the economics of drumming and going on tour, as opposed to exploring a career as an economist, it's a big, gigantic change. Now, you decided to move to New York. You didn't have anything, but then you got plucked out, thankfully, by John Clancy. Being on the road and the first national tour, I'm sure that was a set tour where you're basically getting a certain amount, but you also get overages, correct? Is that what you got on that tour?
For
Yes.
Shrek, there were no overages.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do get overages now, which is great. I will say that like it wasn't overages weren't in that contract. Probably wasn't going to get any. We can just leave it at that.
I
And
think
then
that was a pamphlet B tour since it was the first national.
I should also clarify the nature of the tour. So the tour was non-equity. It wasn't like a replica tour. It was a fully reimagined, rethought version of that show,
Oh, wow.
with heavy involvement by Janine Tesori and David Lindsay Abaird, the book writer. So much so that the rehearsal room was the new orchestration. It was very small, very tight, a six-piece band. So massive orchestra on Broadway, condensed it to six people. I would say very well. I think that it's a great orchestration. It's the six of us in this rehearsal room, and then it's Janine Tesori, John Clancy, and Chris Fennick, the music supervisor. And that I was not anticipating that at all. I didn't think Janine was going to be involved, let alone in the room. And it was
Mm.
like 2 days of just like the closest thing I have experienced to workshopping a score. We came up with incidental music. We're working
Mm.
arts, coming back from dinner with a new 13A to put in the slot.
Wow.
It was very much involved, very much like working this thing out, working out this totally new production. 2 months into the run, we had to rework some of that stuff. We retech the show in Cleveland for 2 weeks, changed things musically. So like that show was like constantly changing. And besides like the songs, is very different from the original Broadway production.
Wow. So you kind of partly wrote the book for this.
We'll say, like, I think John writes some of the best drum parts out there. I mean,
Mhm.
it's some of the best writing a drummer could ask for. But to be able to play it live in front of him for the first time, get that real time feedback. I got a quick djembe lesson from him just during a break. It's all about executing the intent of the orchestrator and the composer. That's always what you want to do. To get that in real time, I was like, this is amazing. I didn't think this would happen so soon in my career. It's already happening. To see Janine dancing during our sits program, I mean, that's just a highlight for me.
What was your setup like on that tour?
The setup, I'm not sure if you know the Kimberly Akimbo setup that John also orchestrated. It's very similar, where it was just a kit, like a 5-piece kit with a djembe and like a piccolo snare, and then a glockenspiel and crotales, a set of crotales, and then some toys, just like some wood blocks and like a marked tree. But it was very much like drum set oriented. Yeah.
And your Hadestown setup, is it similar to Ben Porowski played on Broadway? Did you?
Yeah. I've seen him play it. And I also did the summer of 2023, June, I did the NYU Broadway seminar that Jonathan Haas does. And Ben did one of the workshops. And so I actually
Mm.
got like a mini masterclass from him. So I got to see him play some of these numbers live.
I was kind of circling around him for years, and we were at the Tony Awards in 2019 together, and I still didn't meet him until actually went to go see the show on Broadway. He's a fantastic drummer, man. And he did, as you know, playing these drum parts for the show is just it's just fantastic because you can do almost anything within reason.
Yeah.
And nobody's like, what did you just play? Because it's almost like jazz theater. Do you find yourself on this Hadestown tour ever getting bored at all?
I will say, like, bored isn't the right word. It can be a lot. The book is taxing. It's much more of a workout than I anticipated.
Mm.
But like after every show, I'm like, that was a lot. It was 2.5 hours sung through. There are a couple of breaks, but otherwise you're just playing most of the time. And sometimes it's very involved. And because of the nature of the show, where there's freedom to improv, you're also using a lot of mental capacity too. And so by the end, you're physically and mentally taxed. So I wouldn't say bored, but it can take a toll.
Especially after papers.
It definitely after paper.
When again, I didn't really know the show, and I went out there and subbed on a last minute type of thing, and they were like, for this song, just pretend like you're Billy Cobham and just go off. I'm like, what? Yeah, just. I was like, okay. So I just played a whole bunch of stuff. I didn't know the context, but clank clank, and I'm like, oh my god. And they're like, oh, that's cool, but play a little more. I'm like, oh Jesus Christ. But
Yeah,
man, once I figured out what was going on, and again, what we do as musicians playing in theater, we're supporting what's happening on stage, and he's being thrown around from person to person. It's chaotic, so that whole scene is chaotic, but man, it's so much fun. I
it's
found
so
it to
much.
be fun.
And it's the one song that I still get like the tiny nerves. They still get there every single time.
But why is that? Because of the nature of it, since it's in, what's it in 6/8? What's the time signature of that?
I think it's written in three, but
Okay.
same. I think it's just like the exposed nature of
Yes.
art.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing rests on you being involved and like going crazy and also like keeping time, keeping the band together and getting those hits that set up the spoken word by Hades. All these things need to happen. Something happened in very early on the tour where that 16-inch, there's a 16-inch crash that's on the right hand of the right side of the setup, and it had begun to crack. And so I was working on getting a replacement, but in the meantime, it's a cracked cymbal. And in the beginning of papers, you're playing a lot and you have to basically stop. And I go to choke that cymbal. I cut my finger on the crack. So it hurts. And I'm looking at it and then I'm like, read it. And then all of a sudden I look up and I'm like, oh, shoot, I have to do those 3 hits.
Oh my God.
And so all of this is happening. And then thankfully our Hades, our actors like great. And so I hit it a little bit late and it ended up working out, but just it's like the margins are so fine
Hmm.
that you gotta hit it.
And taking that metal thing off, then playing the rest of the song, and even going, playing the what's that big drum, the
And
Brazilian drum? Yeah, that
yeah,
and the tambourine. There's just so much going on. But congratulations, man. I'm glad you glad you're doing it, keeping that show alive because it's such an interesting show. On the tour, do they still have the lamps that get pushed in?
lamps. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess it's not that difficult of a set to put up because they just have to put the three different panels. I know that I don't think on the tour they separated. I'm not sure if they do that.
No.
Okay.
York.
What's your favorite song to play in Hadestown and why?
I think it's Our Lady of the Underground, the Act Two opener.
Yes.
So many reasons, but effectively, in terms of like the story, and if you're thinking about like musical theater, like the art form, it's kind of meaningless. Like it's not, it's just like a way to open up Act Two, and it's just a song. There isn't really any like dance hits. You're just singing with the Persephone character. And it starts out with the band just like vamping and messing around, sort of noodling, but in time musically. And then we're just playing. And like on the tour, we've stolen things from like the first tour, like some hits and stuff that they do, these like little choke hits coming in on the two.
Yeah.
The band intros happen, and like not only do we get shout outs, but like we all get a little solo. So like when the bass gets an intro, we do like jazz time. I do like jazz time on the hi-hat, and the bassist walks, and it's like a really fun thing. So we just have so much fun playing as a band, which I think is true of the whole show. I think it really is like you're playing as a band with people singing, which is it's very distinct and it's different than traditional musical theater, but there's something different about it. And there's something different about the way that I'm playing and the way that we're playing as a band. And I think that Our Lady really encapsulates that difference really well, to where it's like, you know what? This isn't about being a good like theater musician. This is about being a good musician and just like playing this song. And it's just like so fun. It's just like such a fun song. And you get a shout out. I mean, that never happens.
Yeah, I know they got to remember your name, and it is kind of cool, even though the audience doesn't see you to the end. Which, by the
Yeah.
way, do you go out
I
at
still
the?
do that. I had no idea. I had no idea I had to do that. I got an email about costume measurements, and I'm like, I don't have a costume. What are you talking about? And then I got the drum footage of Anthony, the first tour drummer. I'm like, why is he changing? And then I see him go up with the snare drum with the marching strap.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh, goodness, I have to do that.
There were a couple times on the tour where I was in a drum booth so far away from the stage. I was in like another section of the theater, and you don't have very long at the end of the show to get from there to the stage, and there's no music, and then you have to put on your snare drum and your hat. I don't know if you wear a hat.
I do wear a hat. It's actually very similar to Ben's hat, like the same, almost the same one.
Yes, no cap.
Yeah.
And then put on your snare and get on stage and then hook it up in quiet and then
Yeah.
wait behind the thing and then go out. Have you ever had a situation where you almost didn't make it?
Oh yeah. So we can talk about I'll talk about like basically how the end of the show works every single night. So there's the penultimate number is this sort of like slow burn. You're just like hitting the bass drum. And then spoiler alert, they like the two lovers, like they don't get together. And so there's that song ends and there's about a minute and a half to 2 minutes, something around that, depending on how long the actor takes, of no playing. In that time, from the end of the song through those 2 minutes, I get up, I have my costume with me, I change in the drum booth. So I have my own quick change into costume, get back on the kit, play the last number, and then you have to leave the booth, run up to stage left. Now, if you're up stage left, that's like a few steps. If you're God knows wherever, you have to like walk and sometimes run to make it. Get up on stage, wave, sit down. They do the last number of the show, leave the stage, put on the snare drum, wait, get up, play the bows, then you're done. That happens every single time. But one time I almost didn't make it. We were again, very early on, we were in Portland, Maine, and we had just switched snare drums. We had been using our backup snare drum, and then we switched to like a Yamaha 14 by 5.5 snare drum, like a new one that we had bought to operate as like a third snare drum. So we had enough coverage for backup. And you have to hook the strap onto the lug. And the hook wasn't wide enough to fit. And so the first night with this new snare drum, I'm in the wings with our props head, and we're trying to put it on. You can't put it on. The song is almost ending. I'm like, I don't think this is going to work. And then finally, our tech swing comes in with a wrench, pries open the hook to make it wider, puts it on. I run up, finish the show.
Mm.
I've always made it. I try to map out the route if it's pretty long. So like here, I had to map out the route because there's no crossover space. So you can't go from stage right to stage left in the on stage. You have to go around. So it's a whole process. And that happens every single show.
When you play Our Lady of the Underground, do you reach back into your past and pull out some Art Blakey?
Oh yeah. I mean, for this show, I pull into things that like I never thought I'd be pulling into for a theater show ever. You know, one of my teachers growing up, we learned a lot of like West African, Afro-Cuban, Indian rhythms and how to apply them to the kit. That was like our whole thing. And I use so much of that stuff. I use so much like 12/8 West African rhythms and those songs that are in 12/8, 3. Yeah, I'm pulling from Art Blakey. You know, Mark Guiliana is a drummer I love. I'm pulling into like the stuff he does on papers. I just try to channel him. I'm like pulling from different things that I've learned over my life, which is why this show feels like it feels so perfect because like every time I'm pulling into something that I learned like years ago that I didn't think I'd use. You know, that Our Lady also employs like a shuffle groove. I'm like playing a shuffle. And then there was a while we were doing like a neo soul thing a little bit.
Oh,
Um
really?
in that song. Yeah. Just like all sorts of different traditions and rhythms that I grew up learning for their own sake. And now I'm applying it in a really cool musical way.
You know, I remember in the early 90s when Bizarre Ride from the Far Side came out and other things produced and inspired by Jay Dilla and the whole idea of what some people call drunk drumming, where it's
I'm
like
from
I listen to it and I see people doing it. I was like, I cannot do that. In fact, I heard a Questlove podcast and he was interviewing Lenny Kravitz. And I guess Quest lets Lenny hear what they were doing at Electric Lady. And then Lenny Kravitz is like, there's something wrong with the beat. Something in the way he speaks, there's something wrong with the beat. And he's like, what are you talking about? No, that's the way it is. No, there's something wrong with the beat. Didn't realize that it was supposed to be like stretched. Do
Yeah.
you do any of that kind of stuff? Do you do that in the show with the whole neo soul thing?
There was a part of Our Lady, and again, I stole this from Anthony, the first tour drummer. Like at the end of the song, you know, I'm watching his drum cam footage, and he just goes into a straight up, just like Dilla pulled back beat. And like the whole band is looking, they're like, this is amazing. We did it for a few months, and then we like stopped it. We were like, it's too much. But like the other thing is like not I don't only take things from like drummers and like stuff that I've learned in the past. I also take things from like the other drummers who have played this show. It's like Anthony's a good example. There's so many things that I saw him do that like opened the book up for me in a great way. I saw his drum cam footage the day before our first rehearsal, and it was like a weight had been lifted off because I was so scared of like having to play this music live for the first time in a rehearsal. And I saw him play it and realized like there's so much more freedom than I thought. And also, you know, I'll be on Instagram and you'll see like bootlegs of the show in New York, and I'll watch them because I want to know what the drummer is doing. And again, I've taken things and like I don't even know if it's Ben or if it's a sub, but I hear something that they're doing. It's like I want to do that. And so there are specific moments in the show where the thing I'm doing is like fully taken from one of the other drummers who have played this show. And it's really like opened a lot of like creativity for me.
Speaking of creativity, your LinkedIn profile says tour drummer by night. What's the etc. part of your life?
I think of how I want my life and my career to operate as someone who is passionate about music and can work as a drummer and a musician and also can utilize my other skills to do the other things that I'm passionate about and to live in a way that I can do all of these things. In regards to theater, I'm really interested in the business of commercial theater, how the things that we do get made. And it's relevant. I think anyone who works in theater should have at least a basic understanding of the industry that you're working in and the basics of the finances of how. Last year, I joined a co producing team for Limpica, which was on Broadway for a very short time. And I helped fundraise for that. And getting into that production and realizing just how tight these margins are, the way that those get put up, they're so expensive. And unless they're a hit from the get go, it's a very thin line that all these folks walk on just because of how expensive they are to run on a weekly basis, how expensive it was to put on the production in the first place, and how you have to sell. Look at Broadway right now and look who's on Broadway. It's Denzel Washington, George Clooney, Jake Gyllenhaal, Bob Odenkirk, Kieran Culkin. Like, why are these people on Broadway? To sell tickets.
Bill Burr.
Bill Burr. Othello broke the Ethel Barrymore box office record. To me, it's like, how interesting is that stat really when you're charging $900? It's like you can always break, people say this, like you can always break the box office record by just raising the prices. And I think there's something really fascinating. I get really passionate about this because I want to know, how can we create sustainable theater, commercial theater? So you want a show that does well financially and can make money, and that is also like artistically interesting or artistically true to the creator and like the vision that they had. And I think Hadestown is like a perfect encapsulation of that show because it's a hit, right? It's doing so well. We just did a week in Minneapolis and broke the tour gross record, first tour and this tour combined. We like broke the record for a week of gross, and like the show is still like so rich and interesting. You can like get new things from it all the time. And it's like, I mean, it would be great if all shows were like that, and it's not true. And shows close quickly, and they close without grace from the real estate owners and the producers. So there's a part of me that like wants to lead produce a musical and like do that thing, just because of how fascinating I find it and how passionate I get about like creating theater.
I first learned about the business and how it kind of really works when I was playing Memphis the Musical. And I learned about this thing called the stop clause. When you are not making enough money for a specific week or a couple of weeks, the theater owners could be like, we're going to invoke the stop clause and we're going to cease this production. You guys got to leave because there's a bunch of other ones hovering around that want the theater. They have all the power. And I didn't realize the productions, you want to go into the Schubert, here's an empty space. Good luck. I mean, there's so many things that go into it. You have to bring everything in there. Then you got to promote the show. You have to have an advertising budget. Then you got to make sure that you make above that per week just to stay in that theater. So I first learned about that. And then the second time I really figured things out, of course, was during the pandemic. And we had to close because of somebody in the New York State legislature said we had to close. Then we came back for 3 months. And I never forget talking to one of the lead producers. And it's like, so how are things going? Is it looking positive for the show? He's like, I just don't want to lose money. Of course, nobody wants to lose money. But when he said that, I was like, that's interesting. Are you losing money now, or are we going to stay open for a while? But people started getting COVID. They closed for 2 weeks. And from what I understand, they lost $700,000 one week, $800,000 the next week. And they're like, all right, we're closing. And there's nothing you can do about it. So when shows come around like Lempicka or the other one that Dan Berkery did right after that, back to
Away.
back.
No, I feel bad for Dan, but now he's on out. seemingly a hit.
Yes. A friend of mine said producers lie and shows close, which encompasses everything as far as the business is concerned. Shows don't last really more than a year. Most shows don't. So if you want to produce a show, if you're lucky, Ain't Too Proud, I still believe should be open. But the producers didn't want to lose any money at all, which I understand it's a business decision. But we opened the same time as Hadestown, and Ain't Too Proud has the Temptations name. It has the songs that everybody knows. Hadestown has nothing to do with anything. It has the obscure mythological,
Nothing. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's dark and it's slow and it's just the weirdest thing, but people love it. And it's just really an odd case of a really weird hit. And I wish them well. Of course, they're making all kinds of money, but to try to get yourself on a Hadestown or a Lion King or Book of Mormon or, a Chicago, it's very, very rare. There's only like 10, maybe 8 shows that have been around for like more than 5 years out of the 41 theater shows. And of course, there's plays and musicals, but it's really hard to have a successful hit show until you have something like Othello, where, like you said, if you charge $900, of course you're going to make money. But the average person like myself, I don't go see shows because I see myself paying more than $100 to see a
Yeah.
show. But that's just me. I don't even go to, anything with, more than 100. I was like, why am I paying $300 to go see somebody perform? I'm like, it's just not financially worth it. So there are trade-offs,
Yeah.
as we talked about at the very beginning. But, you're going to discover and you're going to see it's really, really difficult to create great art like Hadestown and make money. Everyone's trying to make that happen. And I don't know if you're going to be able to figure it out. I hope you will.
I don't think anyone has figured it out, to be honest. I mean, I think Mara Isaacs, who is like the lead producer, did an excellent job and is continuing to do an excellent job of maintaining the show, maintaining the tour and everything. But I truly think that no one knows, right? I mean, to know that a show is a hit, I think is like hubris. You don't really know. And if a show becomes a mega hit, sure, afterwards you can say, oh, I knew it was going to be big. But like, did you really, like, did you know that Hamilton was going to be big? Did you see it at the public and say that, like, I think this is going to change musicals? Like, it's going to be a paradigm shift. Did you
Mm,
really think that? Like, I really think like you have to have so much humility in when it comes to like knowing these things, because you can have a show that looks really good on paper. There are so many shows that looked really good on paper, and you think that, how could this not run for years? And it doesn't. And I look at a show like Wicked, and on paper, it's like, this does not seem like a hit. Like, if
hmm
you told me about Wicked before it went on Broadway, I'm like, why?
hmm
And look at it now. It's on fire.
I think a show that's out now, which again, I don't have the money to go see it. I'd love to do it. Unless I find a cheap ticket. I want to see Buena Vista Social Club. From what I understand, it's selling really well and it's really well made. Same thing with Death Becomes Her. All these shows are high quality artistically, and it seems like they're doing well financially. So
Yeah,
maybe,
Javier Diaz, who's in that Buena Vista Social Club and did some arrangements. He also did a masterclass at that Broadway seminar for Sweeney Todd. He was like so good. I was like, I really loved the way that, first of all, great player.
Mhm.
And he's playing Sweeney Todd. He's showcasing this like amazing classical percussion thing, but he also has this whole other bag, which I'm like so grateful that he has such a perfect opportunity. I really want to see that show. I think it's great. Sometimes great music, if it's good enough, can take you pretty far.
Yeah,
Um, Seems like that.
it's taken MJ far.
Oh yeah, that's a good example. That's a good example.
Theater world is about relationships, and the world is about relationships. Do you have any advice for drummers who are looking to do exactly what you're doing?
Yeah, I would say the main thing is that relationships aren't transactional. You don't decide to cultivate a relationship because you want something from the other party, that is a corruption of relationship, and that's not the point. So you want to build relationships with people because you want to learn more about the music, you want to learn more about them as people, and you just want to continue doing that. And it's kind of like you're doing two things at the same time. You're seeking opportunity to play whenever that happens, and you're like meeting people, sitting with them, learning about them. And like sometimes this is happening on the gig, sometimes this is happening when you don't have a gig. And all of this is like when you get the opportunity to play, like make sure you're ready for the opportunity. People remember the playing, but they remember everything else more. And it's definitely that all the other stuff that goes beyond playing is more important. And if you're a good person and you cultivate relationships well and you're kind and respectful to people, that'll show up in the playing. You know, it'll show up musically, because if you're playing with a band, you know, if you have relationships with all the people in the band, you're going to want to play better together. And you just never know where things might lead. One thing that I've done is sort of maintain a mental lineage, or like a family tree of people who I've met, which led to people, which led to people, which led to people. With Hadestown, there were so many people who I talked to like years ago that ended up being sort of like consequential to me getting this job. But at the time, I didn't know that they would lead to this job. And so I think back to college, and there are people who are so important to me in college who either introduced me to people who gave me a shot or who gave me a shot in the first place. And then those people led me to Muse, which led me to John. So it's like that, like thinking about that and like visualizing that is so important for me to understand, like the fact that I'm here is because of all these people. It's
Mm.
not because I did an audition and got the job. It's actually a lot of people who I talked to. I didn't talk to any of those people saying like I want the Hadestown job. Like that never happened. So it's not transactional. Reach out to people, but reach out to people because you want to learn from them and build a relationship. Don't reach out because you want to play their show.
So how do you balance that? How do you balance that? Because, you know, when people say, my name is John Doe and I'm new into New York and I see that you're doing Soul Train, the hit musical that's going to run for 50 years, and I want to sub for you, can I take you out for coffee, buy you a beer or a shot of whiskey? I say yes to that. But, you know, they want to sub and they want to be in New York. They want to play on Broadway, and that's their goal. How do you form a relationship knowing that's your goal, but you know, how do you reach out to people without making it seem like that?
That's sort of the great that's the great question, right?
It's,
The stories I hear from drummers of how they got sub gigs like vary wildly all over the place. One thing that I've done recently is I've given myself a hypothetical situation of like, imagine that tomorrow I got a chair, a drum chair in New York, and I had to pick subs. Who are the subs that I'm picking? And I think of the people that I've met, like who would I want to call? And I think about that and then like reverse it of like, why did I pick those people? A lot of it is character and experience driven, of like just the way that I know how well they work, and I know just how good of a person they are, and I can depend on them. That's the biggest thing. I mean, this is basically an exercise of trust and reputation. Reputation on the person offering the sub thing, because it falls back on you. Because if they do a bad job, yes, it's like, first of all, they're probably not going to get called back to sub again. But also, it reflects not the best on you because there was a trust thing that happened. And you need to make sure that there's trust in the relationship, that you will take my place. If I'm the chair holder, you'll take my place as a sub and do the job well. And like all this stuff that I'm talking about, it like doesn't really have to do with the drumming. We're just talking about being people and like having this is just like people skills. It has nothing to do with the drumming. The drumming, like that, you have to assume that you can play the part. Like if you're going through all this work, like you got to make sure you can play it, because that is sort of secondary to like getting the job in the first place. The thing that actually gives me hope, like I feel like good about it, is the fact that like to me, like most drum parts, not most, a lot of drum parts on Broadway, like I would say they're hard, but like given enough time and like a lot of people can play these parts. A lot of people do play these parts. These shows get put on everywhere all the time. It's not that you need to like spend 20 years to learn this insanely intricate drum part, especially now, a lot of like pop, rock scores, you're just grooving. So the issue, you learn the part, you get it down. You can't just go to a chair drummer and be like, I can play this part well. Can I sub for you? So many people can. Way more than like there are enough like sub slots. It's tricky. I'm not gonna admit that I know the answer, because I'm sure we'll get to this later, but I would love to sub in New York. I actually love like the pressure, like people talk about the pressure and the stress. I love that. Part of the reason why I love theater is just like the stress of I know it's crazy, but like I kind of love that. And it fuels me. It gives me, it's kind of like caffeine. You just get that like the edge. I love that feeling. But I'm not gonna pretend to know how you go about that dance, because it's like people, it's just people, relationships and trust, building that trust, and when you get the shot, taking full advantage.
That's great that you like the stress of subbing. The last time I ever subbed was on the Big Apple Circus last December, and I'm never subbing again. It's really stressful, but man, when you're younger, when you're hungry, and when you really want to do this, it's stressful, but it's a challenge that if you succeed at it, it's like, yeah, I did that. I did this and I did that. And it's really rewarding after a while. I just, man, at my age, I just don't need any additional stressors. So I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, there are some shows that are like, I don't know. I don't know if you saw Water for Elephants when it was in New York with
Hmm.
Mark, but some of those hits, like, I mean, those are also like circus style hits. I'm like,
Hmm.
hard. I mean, I
Yeah.
would by people
I
flying.
tell you, man, when I was on the Big Apple Circus, I was scared for their lives, and
Yeah,
not for me hitting them. There's things that, okay, I can't. It's hard to describe, but it's just this circle that goes around, and the guy is inside of it, running around it, and then he gets on the outside and he's running on top of it. He's jumping up and down. Then he gets a jump rope and he's jumping up. I'm like, oh my God, please don't die. Please don't die. Please don't die. I'm like, crash. I'm like, oh no. That's my stress. That's why I can't do it anymore. I'm done. I'm putting out my sticks on the retirement of passing it down. But yeah, it's when you sub on different types of things, it's exhilarating and it's stressful, but it's worth it once you get it done and people come in and say, "Oh my God, thank you, John Clancy." And John's not there. It's you're there. And they didn't know that John wasn't there. And it's just that's just a compliment that makes you just swell up with pride and accomplishment. And again, they don't know John's there, but they know you're there. And that trumpet player is going to say, "Yeah, I know this guy named Michael. He's sub for John. You should hire this guy on Smash and on MJ." And then your name gets sent around, and like you said, your reputation. And it's not really, of course, your skills and your ability to do this matter. But when you get recommended from somebody who vouches for you, you get pushed up the ladder, pushed up the food chain much faster than you sending a resume to Sean McDaniel and say, "I want to sub for you at Smash." But if you're recommended by somebody else, you'll get pushed to the front of the line. Not that I have any pull, but
it's an exercise in humility too, right? Because there might be things that you want to play, but it's not yours to play. And that's sort of the great thing of it. It's an exercise in keeping your ego in check. And like the greatest compliment is like what you said. It's that someone saying, I didn't notice anything different.
Mhm.
That let it be that way.
Once this tour wraps up, do you have anything that you'd like to do? Is there any dream gig other than having your own chair on Broadway?
I don't know. That's something that right now, as we record this, I'm thinking about my LinkedIn bio. I would love to be in a place of being in New York and maybe working in a general management firm, producing office, or something in the business of Broadway during the day, and then playing at night, whether it's subbing or whatever in that realm. Again, like this is all about balance. And so for me, the future is all about continuing to cultivate the balance of pursuing things that I'm passionate about outside of drumming and continuing drumming as a way to sort of release. And I've chosen theater as the medium and I've fallen in love with it, just like the art form. And I've gotten so deep into it that it's kind of where I find myself now. So I would love to be in a place where if subbing happens, I would love that, but also continuing to work on bettering myself in understanding the business and depending on what that looks like, what realm of commercial theater that is, like I'm still figuring that out. But that's kind of where I see myself, at least in the short term, of yeah, just building that balance and working on that balance, but like within theater.
So you wouldn't do any kind of economist job for the federal government or state government or any other kind of entity, private, or go back to school and teach economics?
I would say like everything is open. You know, I went to college thinking I'd go to law school, and
Mm.
I'm I don't think my parents would fully let me put law school off the table, but it's like barely hanging on the edge. But like everything is like open right now. And I think I'm at a point in my life where it's like I can still try things and be okay with trying things and not liking it. You know, is there a universe where I end up just like getting like a normal job during the day? Like, sure, that could be true. And continuing playing drums and maybe even continuing doing theater. Yeah, I mean, there are people who do it. I've talked to those people. Again, this is the whole thing of like trying to think about what you want to do and finding people who are in similar situations who do those things and learning from them. That's kind of where I'm at right now, is like learning people who have gone before me doing things that I think I'm interested in and maybe following them or just trying to do my own thing.
It's great advice. I tell my kids to do as many different types of jobs, live in as many places as you can to figure out and date as many people as you can to figure out what you don't like
Yeah.
because you won't know until you do it. It's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to live here anymore. I don't want to do that kind of job, but do it first and get the experience and see what's right for you. So, for yourself, I wish you much success and congratulations on being able to play papers night after night.
We're gonna do it twice a day. It's 2 show day. We're gonna do it twice.
Oh, man. You got to get going then. So, enjoy your time out there and hope to see you sometime in New York if I'm still here.
Yep.
And thanks for being a part of the podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was so fun.
All right. We'll talk soon, man.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.